This video on FPL TV is very proudly sponsored by OneFootball. With a rating of 4.8 out of 5 from now over 100,000 reviews on the App Store, OneFootball truly is the biggest and best app for football news, scores and stats from hundreds of leagues all over the world. As for FPL, you can choose to follow every team in the Premier League on OneFootball and then get live updates from all the goals and assists every game week. Download it now completely free using the link in the description box below. Hey guys, and welcome back to FPL TV. Before looking to what's currently left of Game Week 18, let's quickly talk through what went down during midweek's Game Week 17. Game Week 17 was an incredibly frustrating one, with United and Brentford's fixture getting called off shortly before the deadline, and with me having no less than 3 players included in that fixture. My team has constantly been on the wrong end of these fixture postponements since Game Week 13 now, starting with the Son and Kane double up when their fixture against Burnley got called off due to bad weather. Ivan Toney then missed 2 plum games against Leeds and Watford, before then Tottenham having a COVID outbreak of their own. Due to this, I transferred out Son to accommodate Ronaldo up front, only for him to now have missing fixtures as well, a constant uphill battle. With Ivan Toney not featuring again for Game Week 17, my free transfer last week was to bring in Watford's Dennis to partner King up front, and then in a quite sickening turn of events, Watford's fixture also got postponed after the deadline had passed, so effectively I transferred one postponed player for another and had no forward line for the midweek fixtures. Burnley's Brownhill was also in my squad for that fixture, meaning my team was completely decimated last week, putting me at a huge disadvantage to other managers. Like I said a few game weeks back, if you transfer in a player and he doesn't perform well, then fair enough. At least in that case it's an even playing field. But with these random last minute postponements out of our control, and with no fair warning to plan or strategise around them, then some FPL teams are inevitably going to get affected a lot worse than others, and it really renders the game to feel like a complete lottery. After Wednesday, following these postponements, I had only managed to field just 2 players, with 2 points apiece from Rafinha and Bowen, and therefore, despite not taking any hits, I was already looking at a huge 100k drop in the rankings, a cruel and bitter blow to my season. The game week was salvaged somewhat on Thursday, with the likes of James, Trent, Jota and Captain Salah all coming through. However, I only saw some small movement in ranking due to all of these being so heavily owned and popular. So for Game Week 17, it was a damaging and demoralising score of 48, and with that a drop of around 60,000 places. A huge setback. It was already always going to be an uphill battle with that United-Brentford fixture getting postponed, but the Watford game getting dropped after the deadline was the real hammer blow, only managing to field 7 players, and João Cancelo's suspension really couldn't have come at a worse game week. Of course, I could have sold the likes of Ronaldo and De Gea for a -8 hit last week, but at that point I had no idea what would happen in the future. I told myself I'm only going to want to get them back in for next game week anyway, and therefore it didn't make sense to take a big -8 hit only to have to get them back in again. However, even this decision has now been punished, because we now know that their Game Week 18 fixtures have also been postponed too, leaving my squad once again in dire straits with only half a team to play for next game week, and therefore still at a huge disadvantage to the managers that can still field 11 players next week. In the past, I've always been one to take responsibility for bad transfer decisions, but in cases like the last few weeks, it really is just terribly bad luck. So let's look at my side for Game Week 18 now, and see just how big of a mess my team looks to be. As things stand, I can only field 8 players for Game Week 18, and that includes Burnley's Brownhill, who has yet to register even a single attacking return this season. And considering there's lots of teams that can still field 10 or 11 players without a hit this game week, it may no longer be a question of if I can rise or drop in the rankings for Game Week 18, but more how big the drop will be. As I always do, I'll continue plugging away at the game, but being constantly on the wrong end of these postponements is very disheartening in what was just starting to look like perhaps a half-decent season. The issue as well this week, of course, is that I can take some hits to field more players, but there's no guarantees that those players' fixtures won't get postponed as well. And it's also for that reason that I'm very reluctant to activate the free hit chip this week, because if more games do get cancelled after the deadline, then that means the free hit too would get wasted. I haven't ruled out using the free hit, but it would certainly be a huge risk to do so. In all honesty, it's just all complete guesswork at this point, and I'm pretty much at a loss on what to do. Of course, I can sell the likes of Dennis, King, Bowen, De Gea, etc., all the players that blank, But at the same time, they'll eventually all have to make those games up. Therefore, there's also the option to keep them in the squad, and at least in that case, I'd be well prepared for when the future double game weeks do arrive. In that case, I'd just have to take another red arrow on the chin this week, and then hope I can make the points back in the longer run. As for Ronaldo, well, I'd like to keep him too, especially with that fixture against Newcastle coming up in Gameweek 19, if that does go ahead of course. But at the same time, he's the one taking up a huge proportion of my budget, and for 12.5 million to be sat on my bench for a second consecutive game week, well, that may be too much of an ask. My transfer plans that I therefore potentially have lined up is Ronaldo making way for Ollie Watkins, and then upgrading Brownhill to Phil Foden for a -4 hit. Watkins faces Burnley at home this game week, a very good fixture on paper, and the key point to note here is that Aston Villa play just 1.5 hours after the deadline, the first game of the game week. Therefore that game has the best chance of going ahead without the risk of cancellation after the deadline, you feel. As for Phil Foden, well, with all these other postponements, City's fixture against Newcastle looks to be the outstanding game to target, and City have a very good chance to score big in this one. Phil Foden looked excellent in the previous game against Leeds as well, and could provide me with a very strong differential captain. As for the captaincy, as per, will default to Mo Salah, but considering my squad does look to be in dire straits this game week, the way to salvage the week may be to bet on a differential captain instead, which, if chosen correctly, could make up for the fact I have less players than those around me. A big risk, of course. João Cancelo is certainly in my consideration, who now returns after his one-match suspension, and a clean sheet against Newcastle does look a good bet. However, if I am to go differential away from Mo Salah, then it would likely be my potential new signing Phil Foden who gets the nod, who after City put 7 goals past Leeds, looked to be in good shape to score a few goals against Newcastle too. So that's about as much as I can discuss for my team in Game Week 18, but in these incredibly unpredictable circumstances, there's every chance that everything I've talked about could all change if more fixtures do get postponed. I therefore have to stress that for the moment, the plan is to wait until Saturday's game week deadline to squeeze out as much information as possible before locking in any transfers, and under these circumstances, plans can change in an instant. As always, regardless of what I decide to do, I'll post my final team over on Twitter shortly before the game week deadline. Good luck to you all for this game week, FPL responsibly, and I'll catch you all very soon.